Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kristen Spindler, Director of IncubatorCTX at Concordia University, Texas. I'd like to welcome you today to our first virtual Leadership Lunch series. I'm proud to introduce Carolyn Jenkins, who's going to talk today about compassionate leadership. Carolyn is a C-suite technology executive who's had experience managing companies through downturns and through upturns too. Today, she's going to guide us through her 4 philosophies that are essential for compassionate leadership. If you're new to Zoom, you have a chat function at the bottom of your screen, and you'll be able to ask questions and type them in there. Ben, Elizabeth, and I are going to be monitoring the chat for questions, so we'll be sure to see those as you type them in. Carolyn, thanks so much for joining us today. And with that, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so honored. All right, well, let's get started. As Kristen shared, I've had a long career so far, and I've had the opportunity to manage in good times and bad. And I think it was important to point out that the principles are the same. How you motivate and manage and reduce stress are the same. And they're maybe more heightened now because there's a lot more stress and uncertainty now. But these are good principles to learn in any situation. So we're going to talk about the platinum rule, the law not being your bar for what's the right thing to do, how your emotions matter, and different types of communication and how it counts. All right, so I wish I could see a show of hands for how many of you have even heard of the platinum rule. Most people know the golden rule. We all hear this. I see someone raise their hand. Thank you. God, that worked. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Right? Didn't we all hear this growing up? And you instinctively know what that is. But the platinum rule takes that a step further. And it says treat others the way they want to be treated, or do unto others as they want done unto them. So what exactly does that mean? I'm going to pick on my family because I'm comfortable talking about my family. But in my family, my mother loves jewelry, and she buys a lot of jewelry. And one of my daughters does not like jewelry. She doesn't wear jewelry. And my mother insists on giving her jewelry as a present. So my daughter's polite. She'll say, thank you, Grandma. And she literally hands it to me and says, I'll never use this, never wear it. Like, Grandma hasn't figured out in 18 years, what I like. And it makes her feel like her grandmother doesn't know her. If my mom would follow the platinum rule, she would recognize that my daughter loves sports and flying and, volunteering and lots of things where, jewelry's not the easiest thing to wear. And if she would give my daughter something like tickets to a sports game or tickets to some type of event or more flying lessons or something, my daughter would be so excited when she got the gift and a second time when she used the gift. So hopefully when a personal situation will help us take that into the work environment. I have used the platinum rule going back to the late 90s, right? Especially as a manager. You've probably all been in a scenario where your manager wanted to reward you and everybody in the company got a $100 gift card to Starbucks, or everybody got a Amex gift card. And it's not that you didn't appreciate it, but it wasn't very personalized. In the platinum rule, you have to be a little bit more of a servant leader and you're a very good listener. You have to want to help that person feel special. And you send them individualized items. It's a little bit more work, so much greater return. And there are lots of ways you can do that. So for example, in one of my jobs, I had about $50 per employee for a quarterly, kind of spiff that I wanted to give out. And Greg loved video games online. So he got a gift certificate to a video place where he could download games. Lori loved her dogs. She got a gift certificate to a gourmet dog food place that she talked about, et cetera. And what it really showed them was that I listened when they talked to me. When we talked over lunch or at the water cooler, I listened and I learned about them. And those rewards went so much further, and it was the same number of dollars. And, in today's economy, companies may be cutting back, but there's still things you can do that are individualized. You can get a subscription to electronic gift cards, not even gift cards, but just literally cards, e-cards. It's like $20 for an annual subscription for as many cards as you want to send. But you could take the time to get a little bit of an individualized card. I'm going to send Greg one that has sports on it. I'm going to send Catherine one that has roses on it, whatever matches their personality. So if you've not heard of the Platinum Rule, there's a book on the Platinum Rule. As you can see right now, it's very inexpensive, and it just so happens if you do the Audible, you can listen for free if you're in a free trial. It's not a long book. It's very easy, but I think the concept's pretty straightforward, and you can also just Google about it. But this is how you can start practicing implementing this in your life. Listen, really listen. And this goes for your family members. This goes for your coworkers. If you're a manager, it goes for the people that work for you. There is no situation that this does not apply. And for me, I have to record what I learn. So if I really listened when, Lori really told me about her dogs and she mentioned this exclusive boutique dog gourmet store, gourmet dog store, food store, I went and I wrote that down in my note sections on my employees because I knew I wouldn't remember it when I needed it. So practice really listening and practice having a place where you write down the tidbits that you learn so you can reference them when you need them. It sounds so simple. It just takes a little bit of time. Time is also important when we talk about the law. The law is the lowest bar when you're looking at how you treat people. And you really need to think about yourself and where are your standards? What's the best you can do? And if I had better PowerPoint skills, this would be like a hurdle and this would be a high jump, but I couldn't pull that off. So again, sometimes it's easiest to put this in stories. I'm a storyteller, and there was a situation in my life, for example, where we've had to lay people off, much like what's going on now. But this law applies if there are layoffs or someone's just leaving. You fire someone for performance, they've resigned, whatever the situation. And if you're not familiar, if you have medical insurance, there's a law called COBRA that is about how you can continue your medical coverage even though you're no longer employed. And under the law, employers have 14 days to send that COBRA notification when someone's terminated. So put yourself in the shoes of someone right now being laid off. They just found out they're not getting a paycheck. And if their health insurance is through their employer, they also just found out they're not sure what's going to happen to their health insurance. Right? So what could you do that's at a higher standard? The law does not say all you can do is wait 14 days for them to get the letter, and then the letter explains the cost and the timelines for decisions, etc. You could give them a summary letter, or your company, right? But could give them a summary letter on their last day that says, here's what's going to happen. You're going to get this notification in 14 days, and it's going to tell you this will be your cost, and these will be your options. You can start thinking about those now. You could now use this data to go price on the open market what a plan might cost you. It gives them power to take action instead of making them wait. It's just a higher standard. You could also give them examples of different scenarios so that they might understand better how to make the decision if it's wise for them to COBRA or not. You can't tell them what to do, but you could help them with facts and stories make those decisions. So I used this in many other situations. I did manage a company through a very large layoff. I've done this twice, 2 economic downturns, but the first time I did this, the mass layoff was so large that we hit an act called the WARN Act. And the WARN Act tells you you have to give your employees 60 days notice that they're being laid off, or you have to pay them 60 days worth of pay in lieu of notice. And this, act only applies if you have over 100 employees, and then depending on how many you're laying off, and there's a lot of rules to it. So it may not apply to any of y'all situations, but again, it's the point of, we hit this. We actually couldn't even afford to comply with the law. We couldn't hit the 60-day notice, nor could we afford to do 60 days of pay. So we had to ask for an exemption. So for us, we didn't even hit the low bar of the law. We couldn't even hit that bar. And then we had a PR blunder, because the day we did our layoffs, employees went home and they had a holiday card in their mailbox from the COO. And he was standing in a snow globe with the company shirt and logo and making an X because it was in the company name, and wearing cowboy boots with the company logo on them. With, you know, his jeans were tucked in so you could see the logo. And it had a holiday greeting, yours to count on. So we laid people off and they got a holiday card. That was definitely a PR blunder. We made the front page of the business section of the Washington Post. That is not where you want to be when you are laying people off. So please, I've learned, done things well, and I've got some hard lessons learned to share. Fortunately, before the PR blunder, my team and I approached the layoff with above the bar. What can we do better than the law requires? And we created these RIF notebooks. Again, keep in mind, this was 2001. So things would, I mean, it's the same concepts, but things would be executed differently. But we had RIF notebooks. We made everything as easy as possible. We gave them very detailed letters about their COBRA, for their health, for their dental, for their vision, for their life, for their disability, short-term and long-term. We gave them instructions on how to apply for unemployment, because many of them have never done that. We gave them, again, you get the point. We made it as easy as possible. We did all kinds of things the law did not require us to do. We were very honest and transparent. And we apologized for the holiday card. I mean, we were mortified. Literally called people we had laid off and apologized. And the results of that. During the layoff itself, almost across the board, people were kind and understanding. Nobody was excited, but they were kind and accepting and understanding of the situations. We had hired one of the largest outplacement firms called Lee Tech Harrison to come on site and to buy our methodology. They offered to buy that methodology and the template of that notebook. Our then CEO told them, you can just have it. Like, treating people well should be a standard, so you can just have the methodology. We established an alumni group. These people were not angry, disappointed maybe, but not angry. And we had this strong alumni group. And then as the economy bounced back, a lot of people that we laid off came back to work for us, or they followed me to another company. So we did a lot of things right because we did above the law. It took some time. It didn't cost us much extra, but it took us more time and more care. But the protection of the brand, both in the media when we applied after the blunder, our PR blunder, and with our employees and our customers, was huge. But we did it because it was the right thing to do. So how do you implement being better than the law? If you can, right? Sometimes you can't. But first, you better understand the law. So, you know, get help. If you're not an HR expert, or if you don't understand laws in other areas, just find out. Definitely invest the time and the money to find out what the law is. And then understand the procedures related to the laws. Be curious, ask questions, put yourself in the shoes of the people who are going to be impacted by that law, right? Is it your vendors, your employees, your stakeholders, your customers? How is this going to impact them? And really think about, how do I make it the easiest for them, even if that puts a little bit more work on me in the short term? And then just invest that time to be as helpful as you can be. All right, well, during all this, it's really important if you manage your own emotions. And so I threw up here a lot of sayings. I think we all, I don't know who first said anger begets anger, but I think we've all heard that growing up, kind of like right up there with the golden rule. They said, smile and the world smiles with you, etc. And then I threw up one maybe you haven't heard from Irma Bombach, because I happen to really like her as an author, but worry is like a rocking chair, right? It doesn't really accomplish anything. And this is definitely a lesson I learned very young in my life. I like to get things done. I like action, and worry was a detractor for me. And so I really learned how to not worry that much. I look at something, I think about what's the worst case, can I plan for worst case, and then I work my hardest to make sure the best case happens. I also want to point out in this time of high stress that it's really important you take time to care for yourself. If you're stressed, that's going to show to other people. If you're exhausted, it's going to show to other people. You will not be your personal best if you're exhausted and tired and those things. But taking care of yourself and taking time for yourself right now also kind of gives permission to those on your team to also take time for themselves. Some people will naturally do it. They don't need you to say it's okay. But some personalities need to know, oh wait, my boss, my coworker, they really are still stepping away from their computer while we're working from home. They really are taking lunch. They really are shutting down in the evening. They're doing those things, therefore I can too. So we're going to talk about the same layoff that I already mentioned. And it's just an example of if you can control your feelings, right? You know, anger begets anger. If someone is angry with you, but you can respond without anger, it can completely diffuse a situation. And in that same layoff I was sharing with you earlier, when we were planning for the layoffs, I mean, all the executives knew, and we had shared with employees, it was coming. We told people in advance, get your resumes ready. We don't know who we're laying off yet and who we don't. We don't know how deep it's going yet, but it's coming. And there was a regional executive who put herself on the list. So my mistake in this situation was when I was planning the execution of this, we couldn't do one-on-one conversations. There were way too many people being let go in one day. There were over 300 people being let go in one day. But in the office in Bethesda, I wanted to personally get in front of every group. And so we did them in groups, and we did them by department. And she was over the accounting department. And so I put her in the group with her team. I didn't ask her if that's what she wanted. I mean, and she knew the layoffs and she picked who was being laid off, but I put her in the room with those individuals. And in hindsight, I should have asked her about that. I assumed that that's what she would want to be with her team. But she was not happy with that. And when she walked into that room and saw her entire team sitting there, she picked up the RIF notebook. That's reduction in force. I think y'all all know that, but she picked up her RIF notebook, and it was, you know, an inch thick binder. And she literally threw it at me. She called me a word that rhymes with witch, and she stormed out of the room. And I took a deep breath and I picked up the notebook. It was a thick book. It didn't move that fast. I got out of the way. It didn't hit me. And I put it back and I apologized to her team. I didn't get angry. I didn't yell at her. I didn't go after her. I looked at her team and I said, you know, this layoff is really, really hard on everyone. And I know it's hard on her that she had to pick who was sitting in this room. And we just kept on going. And in the end, these were people who were very loyal to her and very close to her, but every single one of them gave me a hug on their way out the door. And I had just laid them off, and they all hugged me and they thanked me for the RIF notebook. They thanked me for understanding that their boss was so upset. If I had reacted to her anger with anger, that entire scenario would have played out very differently. That's the benefit of learning how to control your emotions. It's not easy, it takes practice. Let me share with you, there are a ton of books on this topic. And if you've never read one, now's a good time. There's a whole lot of them available for very inexpensively or free on Audibles. And you can also practice without reading a book. Practice on your kids if you have them, or your significant other. If they get upset and angry and they yell at you, don't yell back. Take a deep breath. Be calm. See if they don't calm down with you. If you're stressed or angry, take a deep breath. Put a smile on your face. Have you ever heard, like, if you smile before you answer the telephone, the people on the other end will know you're smiling? You know, they teach you that in sales. And it's true here too. Even if you're stressed, if you take a deep breath and put a smile on your face, and if you can't fake a smile, take a minute to remember something that makes you happy so that it's a genuine smile. And see how others react now differently, because they will mirror you. All right, well, obviously through all this, you're starting to get the point that communication counts. It matters a lot in good times and in bad, especially right now with people working remotely and a lot of change happens swiftly. It is more important than ever that you give your team clear objectives that are SMART. I'm not sure if everyone here knows SMART. You can Google it, but your objectives need to be specific. They need to be measurable. How does someone know if you're going to succeed or not? You know, quick example, increase sales versus increase sales by 10%, right? One's measurable, one's not. Is it something that you've agreed upon? Is it realistic? And is there a time element? Increase sales by 10% by such and such date. Okay. Quick lesson on SMART. It's a whole nother class. And those objectives need to be tied to the strategic direction of the company. Not just objectives about improving leadership skills, or, I mean, it's okay to have a few of those, but in general, people's day-to-day tasks need to directly tie to the strategic direction. And right now, teams need help, right? We have teams that are having to hit old goals with fewer people because of layoffs. There are teams that are all of a sudden remote and they can't just easily pop their head into their neighbor's office and say da 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 to get on the same page. These tools and this approach is more important than ever. Include in your metrics what's called leading indicators. When I talked about the revenue, for example, if I say, here's your revenue, if I wait till the end of the quarter to see if we hit the revenue number, it's too late. There's nothing I can do about it. We either hit it or we didn't. But if I figure out what further up in advance I need to be watching, how many outbound contacts, how many demos, maybe if you're a software company, you know, you have to figure out what are those things upstream that need to be happening. And right now, that's really important for all these people who are working remotely. And I've managed remote teams, even in good economic times. All my teams have been remote and had remote elements back to the late 90s. And these methods work. They really help the team stay focused. They help them work on the right things at the right time. And they help them feel like their work is meaningful. It is really, really important that you also give frequent updates. Those updates can be short. It limits uncertainty from your team. You have those weekly check-ins on the objectives. Ask people, are you going to hit your objectives or are you not? What are the blockers? Give them a chance to share concerns with you. And then listen. Do active listening, which we talked about before. And it's also really, really important when you communicate to reduce stress that you are honest and transparent. If you don't know something, say so. Just say, I don't know the answer to that yet, but I will find out and I will get back to you by, and give them a time. If it's, I will get back to you in no later than 1 week, or I will get back to you later today, whatever you feel like the real answer is. But just be honest with people so that they will give honesty back to you. And if someone asks you a question and you can't say the answer, even if you know it, just say that. Don't be evasive, especially in this day. If someone says, are we going to do layoffs? And you know 100% the answer is yes, but you're not ready to say that, then say, I'm not prepared to answer that question right now. Don't lie, but if you can't answer it, say that. People will respect you and it will make them more comfortable. It's also important in business, any scenario, good or bad, that you understand communication styles, because ultimately communicating is about their style, not your style. when I was putting this presentation together, it's the first time it ever occurred to me that what I teach about communicating is also the platinum rule, but applied to communication styles. It is the same thing. And we started teaching this back in 94. Oh, excuse me, that was a misstep on my part, in 1998. At our company, we were teaching people, understand your audience, understand your employees, your customers, your coworkers. If someone is a driver, communicate to a driver the way they want to be communicated to. Same thing for an analytical, same thing for expressive, same thing for amiable. There's lots of information on these styles if you're not familiar, but just for a quick hit overview. My examples of these were so old, I had to go make sure I had new examples. So to show how long Star Trek's been around, I've used Spock as an example for analytical back in the late 90s, but I had different individuals. So now I've done them all Star Trek. So hopefully everyone here is familiar with Star Trek. But, you know, Captain Kirk, he's the driver, right? And we have Spock is still the analytical. I want to make sure I don't get this wrong. McCoy, Dr. McCoy is the expressive, and Chekhov is amiable. If that kind of helps you make some quick connections to understand. This might also make some light bulbs go off if you're reading with this. If you have found that you present information to someone and those meetings just don't feel well, maybe you're not presenting data and information the way they want it. Now, in these challenging times, again, thinking about going back to my layoff story, knowing that some people just want the facts and they want it quick and short, and some people want details. When we did our binder, we had a quick summary at the top. Here are the high points, bullet, 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 bullet. And we had all the detail behind because we were trying to communicate in a way that worked for more than one personality type. And you can do that in your meetings as well. If you're now having these check-in meetings where you're asking them, you know, how they're doing on their objectives, you can structure it such at the beginning of the meeting, you're to the point. So those are the people who like to get things done. And if they don't want to stay for the part of the meeting where you get more into details and you start brainstorming, etc., then that's okay. Just think about how you can present your meetings and your data in a way that applies to more than one more than one personality type in a crowd. And then when you're dealing with people in one-on-one, adjust to their type. It's fun to learn your type too if you haven't. So I think I just talked about a lot of this, but scrambling, you know, companies are scrambling right now. And objectives matter. You know, a lot of companies have called and asked me for help or advice or suggestions. And one firm, you know, wanted to send out an email offering some HR services. And, you know, we had a conversation about it. It took the firm 2.5 weeks from the thought to getting that email out. They did not prioritize the email over other things. They didn't communicate to the whole company. This is a #1 priority for us because it could become a new revenue stream. So they had a little bit of miscommunication internally, and so it took them a while to get this email out. Meanwhile, I think I saw their same idea emailed out by about 6 or 7 other firms whose email lists I'm on. So imagine just how many more of those same companies had those same ideas. Examples, objectives and timing and having everyone on the same page to move swiftly really does matter. All right. The CARES Act application is another example. Right now, there's a lot of money, but there's also a limit to that money. So that speed in which you apply matters, right? I know companies who applied Friday as soon as it opened, and I know others who are still working on their application. See my caveat though, there are some banks who aren't yet accepting that. They haven't figured out the application process. So not fussing at those people. But if you are with a bank and you're gonna apply for this needs to be one of your #1 priorities. Whatever else is on your list, you need to look at that and say, okay, like if this timing matters and this matters less, which one's first? And getting everyone on the same page really does matter. All right, so I'm gonna share, again, I'm a storyteller. Back in the 90s, late 90s, I was working for a company that was the 74th fastest growing company in the US. You know, talk about change and things blowing and going. I was a first-time executive, and I was reporting to a first-time CEO. We were a hot mess. We were both figuring it out as we went. No, actually, we had a lot of fun. And I really liked him as a person. But I would get so frustrated that every time I went and tell him a new procedure, a new idea, a new thought to get approval, I would have to go back to him on average 3 times. And it became this joke. I was like, oh my God, there's this rule of 3s. I have to tell you something 3 times before you listen. It was when I watched him interact with other people and I stopped and looked at what can I do differently, that I realized by the time I told my story for the 3rd time, I was actually much more succinct, much more to the point. And that's why he listened. I was presenting the data the way he wanted to hear it. And it was that experience and my adapting to that that really made me dig in and start teaching this personality course. That was a revelation for me to go, wait a minute, this is really about me, because I can't change him, but I can change me. The result of that was that we worked together very well. And we worked together off and on for multiple companies for a total of 16 years. We co-founded several things and exited them very well. And it was fantastic. But it was that experience with him that really led me down the path of realizing I needed to adjust to different personalities, because that's what I could control. All right, again, so what are some of the ways you can implement? There is a lot of change management going on right now. And this book, Who Moved the Cheese, at that same startup, we used to give this to all of our new hires to read. It's a very inexpensive book. It's also free on Audible downloads right now. Think about reading it. It is a fantastic fable type story that really helps show how different people handle change and could be very powerful and helpful right now. Think about your current strategy and what do you need to change about your strategy and how do you communicate that to your employees? Again, break down for them their objectives. And right now, those objectives may be short term because you're just trying to figure it out and adjust quickly, and that's okay. We talked about studying good change management because I jumped ahead on that. And read a book on strategy execution. There's so many books on strategy execution. I had to, though, give a little plug to Joel Trammell here, who wrote The CEO Tightrope. The principles in that book apply to you if you are the CEO or not. Fantastic book. And he also taught a course at Concordia. And he was the founder of a company I was CEO of. So he's a mentor of mine. Fantastic book. Couldn't recommend it enough. But again, there are lots of books. You don't have to do just his.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Carolyn. That was really amazing. And I'm sure that we have lots of questions from the audience. So again, if you've got a question for Carolyn, go ahead, look at the chat box in the bottom of your screen and type in a question. And we'll go ahead and answer those. One question, Carolyn, that we had was from your perspective, if you could tell us a little bit about the difference between managing with compassion and with empathy. Are those the same or different, similar?
I think there's a lot of similarities to, you know, when you have empathy for someone, you're trying to really put yourself into their shoes, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a lot about what compassion is about, trying to put yourself into someone else's shoes and saying, how can I make this easier for them? And I'm not saying you're making it easy, right? I mean, again, I told a lot of stories about the layoffs and there was nothing easy about that. But trying to make it as easy as possible. I think there's a lot of overlap between compassion and empathy.
Another question is, what makes this crisis or downturn different from, say, managing through 9/11 or other crises that you've managed through?
You know, that's a fantastic question. And very early on, I think when you and I talked, I mean, I told you, when, you know, I managed through 9/11. And for those on the phone who don't know, or on the call, on 9/11, I was at the same $100 million company. We were a consulting company, and we were road warriors. We had people in the air all over the country when the planes started crashing. We had people in the World Trade Center. People got grounded all over the place. And we literally were making it up as we went because there was no playbook for this particular scenario. And it feels a lot like that right now. And there's a lot in 9/11, there was a lot of uncertainty. And we had to manage through that. And there was immediate economic, and we had to manage through that. What I think for me makes this feel differently is because I've managed through something like this before. I know that there will be a light at the end of the tunnel. And I expect that there will be something that's the new normal. We'll go back to normal, but it will be a new normal. And I don't quite yet know what that is. But for example, airplane travel was never the same after 9/11. You know, before 9/11, anyone could walk up to the gate. Security was much more lax. You know, there was just lots of different things that we've changed and adapted to. Now you go to the airport and you're excited if you get to go through the line and you don't have to take your shoes off. And well, that used to be the norm, but we're so used to the new norm, and we will adapt because we are that way as a species, and we will get there. So for me, the uncertainty is less concerning because I've been through something where I know that we as a country will pull through, we'll figure out the new norm. Again, kind of look at how do I plan for a worst case scenario, and then how do I work the hardest to make the best happen. And for me, there's a lot of similarities to the two.
Okay, here's a great question. How do you start your business day? What's your first priority each day?
You know what? I am notorious. As soon as I start drinking my coffee, I'm looking at social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, on the business side, right? That's, I start looking those, and from there I go to email. And at night, before I stop, I make here are my priorities for the next day. And that's why I'm laughing, because I really should start my day by re-looking at my priorities, but I have this tendency to scan real quickly to try and say, is there something that now is going to cause me to reprioritize? Is there something that I saw on social media that, I need to take a minute and retweet it, et cetera, for the business? Or is there something in my email that is like, oh no, that is now my number one priority for the day? And then I do try really hard from a time management perspective to not monitor my email all day long. It becomes an interrupter. So I look at it again right before lunch. I look at it right after lunch. I have times when I look at my email, but I literally do not watch my email, just constantly have it up and watch, because then I won't get as many tasks done.
So in your experience, what's the best way to develop leadership? This is both for people who are starting their own companies, entrepreneurs, and also students who might be graduating in this difficult environment.
They're all the typical answers, find a good mentor, read a good book. And if you're just coming out of school, my answer is not going to, necessarily be as up. No, I can make this applicable. My personal best leadership skills came from being a parent. If you're not yet a parent, a lot of my leadership skills also came from my parents and my grandparents, both what to do and what not to do. I mean, I kind of threw my mom under the bus here, right? She's really bad about giving gifts that she wants, not what the person wants. And I watched that. And, there's some members of my family who are highly negative. And I made a very purposeful decision. I don't want to be that way. But for me, a lot of the same things about being a mom apply to business. And, I have the same level of standards for all three of my kids, but I have to motivate them very differently when they were little. My youngest is now 18, but when they were little, I had to motivate them very differently to get them to adhere to those standards. So there's a lot you can learn just from family dynamics, because they're about relationships. And your closest relationships are usually your family and your friends. And so even if you're young in your career, if you spend a little time kind of analyzing those relationships and how you respond and react, you're going to find lessons that you can already take into the work environment. you know, it's again, the practice of not being angry. You know, my husband can, early on, he could yell at me. I learned not to yell back, and then he would calm down. My kids will all tell you, Mom doesn't yell, but she has the loudest raised eyebrow you've ever heard. You know, so those things are so powerful. Good relationships make good leaders.
Don't see any more questions coming up. So thank you so much for joining us, Carolyn. I mean, I learned a lot. I think everyone here did, and we really, really appreciate you joining us today.
It was absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. And thanks all for joining us.
All right, y'all all stay healthy.
Yes, everybody stay healthy and safe. And thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.